In the quiet heart of the kingdom of Ota, there lived a man whose wisdom was a marvel even to the gods. His name was Dan. To say he was wise was not enough. His words had weight. His silence had depth. His presence calmed storms in marriages, and his counsel saved the kingdom from ruin on many occasions. He did not live in the palace, but the palace often came to him. Children in the village ran ahead whenever they saw him, shouting, "The king's brain is coming." Elders nodded with respect. Market women offered him the choicest fruits, and hunters brought him meat from their best kill. Dan was not rich in gold, but in reverence. And to the people, that meant more. Even the king, His Royal Majesty Pata IV, would never make a declaration without first sitting with Dan under the shade of the Irako tree by the river bank. One dry season, when the rivers shrunk and the crops cried for rain, the king summoned Dan to his chamber late at night. "I dreamt last night that if I go to war with the northern clans, victory shall be mine," the king said, his brow furrowed. Dan was quiet for a long time before replying, "Victory in dream does not always mean victory in battle. Sometimes, dreams come as warnings, not promises. Let peace be your weapon this season, your majesty." The king obeyed. Months later, the northern clan sent word. They were prepared for war, but open to peace talks. That decision saved thousands. Such was the honor given to Dan. Yet, in his own home, a quiet fire had begun to burn. His wife, Laura, was a woman of strong spirit. Beautiful, intelligent, and passionate, she stood by Dan in his humble lifestyle. But with time, something grew in her, a seed of comparison watered by whispers. That evening, she called her husband inside after his return from helping an elderly couple resolve a bitter feud over land. "My husband," she said, placing a bowl of warm yam porridge before him, "you are more than what you allow yourself to be." Dan smiled, already suspecting where this was going. "How do you mean, Laura?" She sat opposite him, eyes serious. "I mean, even the king cannot make a move without you. He listens to you like a child listens to a teacher. The people adore you. You bring peace into homes and light into the kingdom, yet you walk barefoot and eat roasted yam by the fire like a commoner." He sighed. "And that is how I choose to live. I did not ask for people's respect, but I live to earn it." She leaned closer. "You deserve more. Even the king worships your words. Why remain a servant of a throne you should sit upon?" Her words pierced his soul. Dan had never once thought of power as his right. He had always believed wisdom was a gift to guide, not to rule. But that night, he turned the thought over and over in his mind, like a strange fruit whose taste you can't resist. That same week, news spread across the kingdom. The king would be hosting all rulers from neighboring lands. It was an honor and a test. To be accepted among the circle of great kings, the feast had to be exceptional, flawless, unforgettable. Servants rushed about the palace. Foreign fabrics were ordered. Drummers from distant tribes were summoned. The palace cook wept under the pressure of preparing a menu that had never been tasted before. But the king remained calm. He knew what to do. "Summon Dan," he said. "Let him guide us as always." The guards left immediately. But when they returned and led Dan into the king's chamber, something had shifted in him. The king greeted him warmly. "My friend, I need your wisdom more than ever. I want to host the greatest gathering this land has ever seen. Tell me, what must I do?" Dan looked around the chamber, then sat down gently. "Before I speak, Your Majesty, I must make a request." The king's eyes twinkled. "Speak freely." Dan cleared his throat. "I want half of your kingdom." The room froze. The king blinked. "I don't understand." "I want half of the kingdom," Dan repeated, voice steady. "Land, palace, title, everything. If I'm to advise, I want my name carved beside yours." The king stood slowly. "Are you joking, Dan?" He shook his head. The king's hands clenched. "My kingdom into two. Half of all I have. Why would you ask for that? What spirit entered you?" Dan looked down. "I only ask for what I deserve." "Deserve?" The king's voice thundered. "Leave my sight. Now, before I forget our years of friendship." Dan stood and walked away, slowly with head held high, but heart already heavy. The king turned to his guards and said, "From today, let no man enter this palace unless his heart is pure." I trusted him. But pride makes even the wise fall like leaves in dry season. Outside the palace gates, Dan stood as whispers followed him. What happened? He asked for what? Is it true? His wife, Laura, met him at the edge of the forest trail. What did he say? Dan said nothing. His silence was loud. She smiled softly. Don't worry, my husband. Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. But as they walked home, the sun seemed to dim, and in the shadows, a forgotten man heard everything. His name was Kobi. Kobi lived on the edge of the market square, behind the broken walls of an abandoned shrine. No one knew how he got there. Some said he was the son of a mad woman. Others claimed he once served in the palace until a spell made him lose his senses. What everyone agreed on, however, was that Kobi was a fool, always laughing at the sky, speaking to animals, or singing to broken pots. Children threw pebbles at him for fun. Merchants ignored him. Even beggars kept their distance. But in the quiet of night, Kobi's laughter turned to prayer. His mind, far from lost, was filled with thoughts too heavy for the world to hear. He had learned long ago that to be taken seriously in a proud land, one must first be misunderstood. That afternoon, as he was sweeping leaves near the palace gates in exchange for leftover food, he overheard two soldiers talking. Can you believe it? Dan asked for half of the kingdom. The king nearly struck him, said he trusted him like a brother. He left humiliated. The whole town's talking. Kobi dropped his broom and leaned against the wall, a strange smile forming on his lips. So even the wise can fall, he whispered. He lifted his eyes to the sky. Now, Lord, will you use the one they call foolish? That night, as the moon bathed the palace in silver light, Kobi appeared at the gates. The guards laughed so hard one nearly dropped his spear. You again? Looking for food or just chasing shadows? I come to see the king, Kobi said calmly. The guards held their stomachs in laughter. And I come to become a bird. Let me in, Kobi said again, for I have come to replace the one who fell. One of the guards chuckled. You mean Dan? You want to stand where he stood? Kobi nodded. Something about the boldness in his tone quieted the men. One of them shrugged. Let's take him to the king. He could use a laugh. They led Kobi through the tall doors into the throne room. The king, still heavy with betrayal, sat with a furrowed brow, sipping spiced wine. Your Majesty, the guard bowed mockingly. A guest. The king looked up. His eyes widened. You. Kobi dropped to his knees. My king, may you reign forever. The king raised a hand, half amused. And what does the fool want? I heard what the wise man said. Kobi began softly. And I know it pierced your heart. But do not be afraid, my king. I will fill the gap. The room went still. Then the king laughed. It was not a small chuckle. It was a full, deep, uncontrolled laugh that echoed against the pillars. One of the court ministers dropped his goblet in shock. You, the king wheezed. The one who bathes in puddles and speaks to goats? You want to advise a king? Kobi stood. His face held no mockery, only calm resolve. I know what people say about me. They call me useless. But the God of heaven gave me something no man gave me, clarity. Not of power, but of purpose. The laughter faded. The king studied him. You are serious? Yes, my king. The king leaned forward. And why should I trust you? If you disgrace me at this royal gathering, I will feed your head to the fowls of the air. Kobi bowed. Then let the birds wait. I will not fail you. The queen, who had been listening quietly, leaned toward the king. Let him try, she said. We've lost nothing. And your enemies expect failure. Let the unexpected surprise them. The king, still bewildered, nodded. 3 days. That's all you have. Plan the gathering. If the land sings your name afterward, I will reward you. If not. I understand, Kobi said. I ask for no reward. Only the chance to remind the kingdom that wisdom wears no crown. The king watched him go, still half thinking it was all a dream. As Kobi stepped out into the night, he whispered to the wind, "Let the earth speak through the forgotten. Let the dust rise and form beauty. Let the foolish confound the proud." And the stars above him twinkled, as if they too were waiting. The kingdom never seen such urgency. Servants ran in and out of palace halls, artisans worked through the night, and every trader hoped to catch the attention of the royal stewards. With less than 3 days before the gathering of kings, every eye turned to the palace, and behind closed doors, every whisper carried the same question. Who is in charge now? When the answer came, Kobi the fool, there was laughter. Wild, breathless laughter. "A madman is planning a royal feast," one market woman gasped. "We're doomed," said the palace cook, tearing his apron in frustration. "We'll all be disgraced." But Kobi did not hear their mockery. Or maybe he did, and simply chose not to listen. By dawn of the next day, Kobi rose with a staff in his hand and an old satchel tied across his shoulder. He walked past the palace and down into the heart of the land, greeting every person he passed. But unlike others before him, he did not visit the rich, the merchants, or the officials. Instead, he went to the edges of the kingdom, where wisdom was buried in wrinkled hands and tired eyes. His first stop was an old potter named Mama Jer, whose fingers still shaped clay even though her back was bent from years of labor. "Mama," Kobi greeted, bowing low, "I need your hands to shape the plates for a royal gathering." She looked up, startled. "Plates? My hands shake now." "They shake with truth, not weakness," Kobi replied. "Let your spirit shape them." She blinked, then smiled for the first time in weeks. "Then I shall." Next, he visited a group of weavers who had been long forgotten by the palace. They were women who wove cloth from the bark of sacred trees, cloth their ancestors once used to bury kings. "I want no silks from foreign lands," Kobi told them. "Let your hands create robes that speak of our roots." The women nodded, their pride returning like fire rekindled. By noon, he was in the farmlands, speaking with fruit growers. "I want mangoes that taste like sunlight," he said. "Yams that carry the story of your sweat." The farmers, amazed that a palace messenger had come to them, promised their finest harvest. From there, he met with hunters, dancers, drummers, carvers, and children, yes, even children. He gathered a group of village boys and girls, some barefoot, some shy, and taught them a dance he had once learned from a blind drummer during his wandering years. "This dance will be the heartbeat of the land," he told them. "Dance not to impress, but to express." They smiled, eyes wide with excitement. Back at the palace, chaos reigned. "Where is he?" the palace steward shouted. "We haven't seen him all day." The queen, calm as ever, only said, "Let him work in silence. Not all builders carry noise." The king said nothing. But that night, he stood by his balcony, staring into the distant hills. "Father," he whispered, "I have let a man the world mocks prepare my honor. If I fail, my crown will fall. But if he succeeds—" He didn't finish the sentence. By the third day, just before dawn, a strange hush covered the land. The palace gates opened, and carts rolled in, not with gold, but with wooden carvings, calabashes, earthen pots, fruits wrapped in palm leaves, and cloths dyed in colors drawn from local herbs. The air smelled of spice and earth, music and meaning. Servants stared in confusion. This was no royal splendor. But the queen's smile deepened. Kobi appeared at noon, walking barefoot into the palace courtyard, his satchel still on his back. He wore no crown, no robe, just a plain brown wrapper and a white cloth tied around his head. "Are we ready?" the king asked, trying not to let his nerves show. Kobi nodded. "More than ready, my king. The kingdom itself has prepared this." "Not I." "Where's the wine from Ajikiri?" the steward hissed. "We have palm wine from old trees, fermented by the widow of a war hero," Kobi answered. "Let our guests taste history." "And the decorations?" "Fresh flowers from the sacred hills, placed by orphans whose hands are pure." "The music?" "Dancers of all ages, not to perform, but to celebrate." The king took a deep breath. Then he said, "So be it." That evening, the horns sounded across the hills as the kings from neighboring lands arrived in caravans of gold and guards. Their robes shimmered, their jewels sparkled. But as they stepped into Ota's palace, they stopped. Instead of marble, they saw murals painted on clay walls, images of harvest, laughter, marriage, and birth. Instead of long feasting tables, they saw mats woven with care and food placed in carved bowls passed from hand to hand. Instead of foreign songs, they heard drums that spoke the language of the land. Children danced in joy. Old men clapped. Women sang. The air was thick with heritage and honor. The guests whispered to one another in awe. "This is no ordinary feast," one said. "No," another replied. "This is a return to something forgotten." When the king rose to speak, he wore a robe made by the old weavers, his crown replaced with a humble headpiece woven from the bark of the Irako tree. "Today," he said, "we rise not with gold, but with greatness. Today, we show that a kingdom is not built by wealth, but by its people. And I thank the one who reminded me of this truth." He pointed to Kobi, who stood at the side, head bowed. A long silence followed. Then one of the visiting kings stood and clapped. Another followed. Then the hall roared with applause. That night, as the stars danced above the palace, the kingdom of Ota slept with pride, not the pride of thrones, but of truth. And Kobi, the fool, had risen. The palace had never felt so alive. 4 days after the gathering, visitors remained in the kingdom of Nkuma, unwilling to leave. They spoke of the celebration as one of the most sacred and authentic royal events they had ever witnessed. The laughter, the food, the dance, the warmth, it all lingered like perfume in the air. But no one was talked about more than the man who made it happen. The name Kobi traveled from one village square to the next. First whispered, then sung. Mothers began telling their children stories about the fool who taught kings what true greatness meant. And those who once threw stones at him now offered greetings and bows as he walked through the market streets. Still, Kobi wore the same plain cloth and carried the same old satchel. Days later, in the private chamber of the king, a quiet meeting took place. The room was dimly lit. Only the glow of 2 oil lamps and the warmth of burning frankincense filled the air. The king sat at a wooden table, hand resting on his chin, eyes focused on the man before him. Kobi stood calmly, barefoot as usual. "You," the king began, "have changed the course of my kingdom." Kobi didn't reply. "You've done what my best advisors could not do. You brought peace through simplicity. You turned mockery into honor." Still, Kobi remained silent. The king finally smiled. "You remind me of a story my mother once told me," he said. She said, "The lion may wear the crown, but the ant sometimes leads the way to water." He stood and walked closer. "Tell me, Kobi, what do you desire? Riches? Land? A title?" Kobi shook his head gently. "No, my king." The king raised a brow. "Then what do you want?" Kobi looked up, eyes steady. "I only ask one thing. Let your ears always be open to the ones without shoes. For sometimes, truth comes with dusty feet." The room went quiet. The king sat back slowly. "Is that all?" Kobi nodded. "Wisdom doesn't live in gold. It lives in listening." The king watched him for a long time, then said, "You are no longer the fool they laughed at. From this day forward, you shall be known as Kobi the Humble. And though you ask for nothing, I will still give you honor." Kobi smiled, but not with pride. It was the kind of smile that belonged to those who had already found treasure inside their own hearts. That evening, a great announcement was made in the palace courtyard. The trumpets sounded. The villagers gathered in their hundreds. The queen, dressed in a robe of hand-woven threads, stood beside the king. "My people," the king's voice rang across the courtyard, "you witnessed a celebration that reminded us of who we are, not just as rulers, but as people. That celebration was made possible by a man who was once forgotten." Gasps and cheers followed as Kobi was led forward. "Today, I declare him royal advisor of the people. Not for his wealth, for he has none. Not for his titles, for he never sought one. But for his wisdom, humility, and courage to serve without pride." The crowd erupted in applause. Children jumped. Elders nodded with pride. And many wept. Back in his quiet room that night, Kobi sat by his little clay lamp. He looked around at the same cracked walls, the same straw mat, and the same satchel by his side. He reached inside it and pulled out a worn-out page from a book he had once found in the river. The words were faded, but he had memorized them long ago. He who kneels to serve stands taller than kings. But across town, in a house that had once echoed with admiration, silence reigned. The home of Dan. His wife Laura sat on the floor beside the cold hearth, her hair unkempt, her wrapper loosely tied. Her eyes were swollen from days of weeping. "I ruined everything," she whispered into the silence. "I turned his peace into pride. I pushed him to ask for what God never gave him." No one answered. In the next room, Dan lay on a mat. He had not spoken in 2 days. He had torn his royal garments and wrapped himself in sackcloth. He refused food and water. The villagers no longer came to seek his counsel. His name had vanished from the lips of the people, and in his heart, shame had taken the place of honor. On the 3rd night, a knock came at their door. Laura opened it slowly and gasped. Standing there, dressed in plain royal blue and a simple cap, was the king himself. "My king," she cried, kneeling quickly. I don't know what to say." The king gently lifted her. "Is Dan home?" She nodded tearfully and led him inside. When Dan saw him, he tried to rise but stumbled. The king caught him. "My lord," Dan whispered, "I am ashamed. I betrayed the trust you placed in me." The king knelt beside him. "You are still wise, Dan. But now, perhaps wiser." Dan's lips quivered. "I let pride speak louder than purpose." The king nodded. Sometimes, God humbles those he loves, so their heart may not be lifted above the stars. A tear rolled down Dan's cheek. "Will the people forgive me?" "They already have," the king said. "They miss your wisdom. But this time, return not as a man above them, but as a man among them." He reached into his robe and pulled out a folded cloth. "Come back to the palace when your heart is ready. We still need your voice, now joined with humility." He left the cloth by his side and stood. "I will wait," the king said gently. Then he left. And that night, Dan finally ate. Not out of hunger, but hope. The days turned slowly, but while time moved forward, hearts began to heal. For the first time in many moons, Dan stepped outside his house and sat under the old mango tree that once shaded visiting elders. He didn't wear his flowing garments. He wore simple white cloth tied around his waist. His beard had grown. His face was lean. But his eyes, though dimmed with sorrow, held a new softness, like the eyes of a man who had seen his reflection in broken glass and learned to love the cracks. Children walked past him shyly, unsure if they should greet him. One little boy paused. "Baba, will you tell us a story again one day?" Dan managed a weak smile. "One day, when my heart is strong enough." The boy nodded and ran off. Anna brought him warm pap in a clay bowl. "Drink, my husband," she said. "Even the stars fall, but they still shine at night." Dan looked at her long, then took the bowl. "You were right, Laura. God gave me something rare. But I used it wrongly." She knelt beside him. "Then use it rightly now. Rise again, but this time with wisdom that listens to its own echo." Meanwhile, at the palace, Kobi had not changed his ways. Though honored as royal advisor of the people, he still fetched water from the village stream, still swept leaves behind the shrine, still told riddles to children in the marketplace. A group of ministers approached the king with concern. "Your Majesty, Kobi must learn to carry himself with dignity. He must wear the royal colors, eat royal food." The king shook his head. "Kobi's dignity does not lie in cloth or silver. He teaches us that honor is not what we wear, but who we are." The queen agreed. "He is the kingdom's mirror. Let us not blur the reflection." One morning, while the air still smelled of wet earth and wildflowers, a strange but beautiful sight took place in the palace courtyard. Kobi stood on one side. Dan stood on the other. The guards murmured. The ministers stood still. And the king walked between them. He stood facing the crowd and raised his hand. "Today," he began, "two men stand before you. One once wore honor until pride wore him down. The other wore shame until humility raised him up." He turned to Dan. "Wise one, do you still wish to serve?" Dan bowed. "Yes, my king. But now I come not to lead, but to learn." The king turned to Kobi. "And you, humble one, Will you walk beside him? Kobi smiled. As long as he listens not just with his ears, but with his heart. The king stepped aside. Then, something no one expected happened. Dan went down on both knees. Before Kobi. He bowed his head. I judged you wrongly, he said. I mocked your way. But you brought life where I nearly brought shame. Kobi gently lifted him. The soil cannot mock the rain. We both serve the roots. A cheer broke out from the crowd. Some clapped. Some wept. Some bowed their heads. The queen covered her mouth, hiding her tears. The king embraced both men. From today, he declared, these two shall serve side by side. The wise and the humble. The experienced and the fearless. The old and the free. From that day, things changed in Ota. Decisions were no longer made behind closed doors. Instead, the king often walked through the villages with Kobi and Dan by his side, listening to farmers, market women, widows, and even children. The three of them would sit on logs by the stream, asking elders about their needs. They would watch dancers practice in the square, offering encouragement. They would enter classrooms unannounced, hearing the hopes of children. And slowly, power in Ota became something different. Not heavy, not feared, but shared. Dan regained the love of the people, but he never tried to take his old place again. He preferred the back row in meetings. He spoke less, but when he did, every word carried weight. Laura, too, found peace. She joined other women in mentoring girls and young wives, teaching them not just how to speak, but when to be silent. And Kobi. He remained Kobi. He refused a royal carriage. He refused a palace robe. He once said to the queen, if I change too much, who will remind your children that even clay can carry water? One quiet evening, as the sun painted the sky in gold, the king stood on the palace rooftop with his son, the young Prince Obinna. The boy asked, Father, who is the most powerful man in our land? The king looked below, where Kobi was sitting under a tree with 3 children, laughing and clapping as they danced around him. He pointed. There, he said. The one who never asked for power. The one who served even when mocked. The one who rose not with might, but with meaning. The prince blinked. But he wears no crown. The king smiled. That is why it fits him best. Please, subscribe to African Tales by Helen Gold for more African stories. Comment, like, share, and turn on your notification bell.